Welcome to the pitch. My name is Anthony Vispagliosi, and I will be your moderator for tonight's program. As a reminder, this is a monthly program. It is broadcast and scheduled for the second Thursday of each month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're available, or if you're not, make yourself available every second Thursday at 7 p.m. for the pitch. At each program, two promising companies are going to be presented to you and to our panel. They will present their technologies, their business plan, and their thoughts about how they'll carry their business forward to our panel. Our panel will then get the opportunity to ask questions about their plan, their direction, and their technology. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our panel, beginning with Michael Sherman. Mike brings to this panel more than 30 years of experience in the medical device industry. Now, 20 of those years in the orthopedic product development segment of this marketplace, and 9 years plus in the venture capital world in medical technology. Michael has advised dozens of companies on all areas of technology innovation, specifically in the neuromusculoskeletal space. Michael holds more than 120 patents. Next, we have Scott Bruder, MD and PhD. Scott also brings more than 30 years of experience to this panel. First, as an MD clinician, then as a scientist, and now, more recently, as a leader in product development and innovation, particularly in the areas of biotechnology, cell therapy, and diagnostics. Welcome, Dr. Bruder. And our third panel member this evening is Ben Joseph. Ben currently is Vice President for Commercial and Corporate Development for Anika Therapeutics. He is also a founder of BenKey Ventures and serves on the board of directors of several companies. He was in charge of equity investments at Ambassador Enterprises and has been is a former general manager for one of Zimmer Biomet's business segments. Welcome, Ben. This is your first time with us as a member of our panel. We're delighted to have each of you here. And now, as for me, I spent my career first as an investment portfolio manager, then an analyst, then an investment banker, and most recently as an entrepreneur, executive, and financier over the last 23 years, doing those last three things. Along the way, my brothers and I joined together to form Vispagliosi Brothers as a single family office dedicated to investing our capital in the neuromusculoskeletal space. We've been doing this now for 23 years. During that period of time, we founded and invested in more than 35 different neuromusculoskeletal businesses and 15 different investment funds specifically dedicated to the neuromusculoskeletal or orthopedic space. Over this time frame, particularly over the last 19 years, we've exited 18 businesses, generating more than $2.5 billion in exit proceeds to our lenders, our co-investors, our partners, and ourselves. And along the way, we've generated a 3.5 times multiple on invested capital in this space that we're going to be talking about tonight in the pitch. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our next company this evening. The world of 3D printing technologies in the healthcare environment is moving very fast, very fast. Our next company
SurgiSTUD has used 3D printing to create an alternative to the cadaver training for surgeons. This is a truly ambitious undertaking, which, if it is successful, could indeed radically improve surgeon training globally. Here is their pitch.
The medical industry has grown exponentially in the last decade alone. Have your programs grown with your innovations? SurgiSTUD is an innovator in surgical training and education, providing a comprehensive platform that mimics real-life anatomies, pathologies, and deformities. STUD is an acronym, Surgical Training and Utility Device. Whether you're planning an internal training course for your sales reps, preparing an international conference or course, educating new surgeons on a product line, working with engineers to improve design, or demonstrating your tool sets and techniques, our engineers will work with you to develop the perfect SurgiSTUD model to advance your training or educational goals. SurgiSTUD can address all your goals, help you realize them into physical hands-on models, and maximize your training experience and make your next course exceptional. Our platform is made for customization. You can choose the age, size, anatomy type, and even bone quality for your patient. Make your next program exceptional. Customers turn to SurgiSTUD when seeking to reduce costs of organizing and improving training courses, looking for models with patient-specific or custom pathologies and anatomies, including specific bone densities, increasing sales through surgeon demonstration, education, and outreach, frustrated by lack of reliable benchmark testing for product development, forming training programs which span basic to mastery level skills, challenged by the lack of opportunities for deliberate hands-on training, frustrated with the high costs and logistical challenges of working with cadaver specimen, stalled by the lack of access to specimens, conflicted by ethical and cultural limitations of human specimens. Building your next model. Every model starts with a 3D printed bony foundation that is rooted in data. We've biomechanically tested our technology so that it not only feels very haptically similar to bone, but also instruments and corrects realistically. Our engineers and surgeons have worked to provide a range of different bone options, so you can vary the cortical wall thickness, cancellous infill density, and IM canals, even within a single model. This means you can instrument on healthy patient bone, vary osteoporotic bone, and everything in between. Choose the anatomy that works best for you. Our library includes different anatomies that vary from normal, healthy, to severe deformity, degeneration, and/or trauma. If you don't see the anatomy you want, our teams are on standby to create custom models from real patient CT scans. Make your next course exceptional. Next, we'll identify what add-ons will advance your model and educational goals and work within your budgets to create comprehensive surgical environments that provide each user with a deliberate, repetitive, hands-on training experience. With our versatile platform, you can now provide training in a surgeon lounge, office, or medical device facility, driving out the costs of expensive labs and reducing unnecessary travel time. By creating custom deformities, you can take a user from basic training to a mastery-level experience while controlling the training experience. Research and development can also regulate each step of the testing process, as the SurgiSTUD platform provides you with a cost-effective way to design and implement a consistent, controlled, and highly customized setting. Our platform is accepted around the world, as there are no ethical or cultural concerns with our synthetic models. Reduce turnaround time from traditional training models, as our order to delivery is within 2 to 3 weeks, and request for patient-specific scans to be reprinted is under 4 weeks. For more information or to request a custom quote, please visit SurgiSTUD.com.
Wow, that was fascinating. This is an area of great interest, great time allocated, and great expense applied, improving the quality of care through better training, and education. Well, presenting on behalf of SurgiSTUD is its Executive Vice President, John Brambert. John, welcome to the pitch. And now, let's begin with our first questions. Dr. Scott Bruder, let's start with you and your thoughts and questions, given that you have functioned as a clinician, as a scientist, as an innovator. What are your thoughts here?
So thanks for the opportunity. And John, really interesting to see the story of your business. I've been in those messy cadaver labs, and there's something that's important about being in a cadaver lab. There's also something that's obviously beneficial about the service that you're offering. Before I get into a couple of questions about the actual products, can you comment on your revenue over the last 12 months and your profitability? And the third piece of that is roughly how many specimens have you sold to get that level of revenue?
Yeah, we're a private company. So regarding disclosing that, I'd like to just share that, we started in November of 2019, so pre-COVID. And I would just tell you that we hit a milestone that one out of 1,000 companies hit going through the COVID process as far as the startup goes. So we generate typically between 80 to 100 models on a monthly basis. Many of these have been derived from our spine models and where we initially started to roll out our platform. And then over this past year, we have been working diligently on a orthopedic platform that would include a knee, a hip, a shoulder, and a foot model.
Okay, are you prepared to?
Yeah, I was just going to say we're prepared to triple in size this year with our number of models that are going out.
Oh, I hope you can. That's a different question, though. I was going to say, are you prepared to comment on an average selling price of a spinal model?
Yeah, the models range anywhere between, I would tell you, $1,000 to $2,000. I think historically we know that we're between 25 to 35% less than a cadaver would cost. Yeah.
That was that next question. So you're about 25% less?
We're typically our models are 25 to 35% less than the actual cadaver. Okay. But when you take these out of the lab, and that's the beauty about the versatility, we are typically 75% less than what it would cost to take that cadaver into a lab versus doing this elsewhere.
Okay. I think that seeing, again, I've been to the website, professionally done, appreciate that. And the pitch that you prepared. I see like a 2 to 3 week turnaround for ordering predetermined pathology. And if you're planning a lab, that's really nice turnaround because it usually takes longer than 3 weeks to set up a cadaver lab anyways. That's great. I'm struggling a little bit and wonder what kind of feedback you've had around a 4-week turnaround for patient specific. Because if I have a patient, well, if a colleague of mine has a patient that has some unusual pathology and I want to sample that, one, you probably know you're not the only game in town who's doing that. But two, I may not want to wait 4 weeks to get a specimen so that I've got a patient with some, significant problem that is not routine that I can't figure out just because I've been a surgeon for 20 years. What's been the feedback around that lag of 4 weeks?
Yeah, let me, I'll address two things. First, you mentioned there's other players. I would tell you early on, our company was very smart in the fact that we hold a patent for 3D synthetic printing of bone. And that is generated around the tissue referencing components such as a CT or MRI. And that is to meet the anatomical, the biomechanical, and the physiological properties of bone. So we hold that patent not only in the US, but in other countries. Second of all, when you're talking about a specific deformity or pathology that a surgeon is looking for, traditionally we are having them upload a CT image into a HIPAA compliant software. We go back and render that imaging then and send it to the physician. The biggest bottleneck is how quick they turn around and improve that rendering before we print it out. We have a lot of experience in doing these. I would tell you 4 weeks is at the utmost, the longest period of time. We've had them done as far as 3 to 5 days or later, and we can do rush fees to accelerate those.
Okay. Do you think that based on my last question is, do you think that based on your customer experiences, do you think that what's the split between training sort of prospectively and custom custom designs?
I would tell you our library has grown based off of the client's needs to have certain anatomies or pathology and deformities. But with that being said, I'd say about 90% of what we do has either been covered through previous orders, or it's within our capabilities to be able to deliver these to the medical device companies. I want to be clear that the medical device companies traditionally are working with the surgeons. That could be your local sales agency or distributor. It can be your medical education within the med device industry. So that could be for sales representative training, or it can be for surgeon training, and also at the academic facility. So it's really kind of the customer that we tailor to is the medical device customer who is working hand in hand with the surgeon.
Well, congratulations. And the fact that you're operating, I think, in an unregulated space, right, is fantastic for you.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, John, for your answers to Scott's questions. Now, let's go to Ben for your thoughts and questions.
Yeah, thanks, John. Congrats. It's very interesting. Obviously, 3D printing and additive manufacturing have transformed a lot of different spaces in healthcare, particularly within orthopedics. I like to pick up on a couple of areas that Scott teased out. In your pitch video, you mentioned a few different, I would say, channels or pathways for this. Where do you see your highest value channel, whether it's on the clinical training side, whether it's on the R&D, whether it's on the testing, mechanical testing, et cetera? How do you see where do you see the highest value opportunity?
I think the highest value is always going to be with the surgeon training that's done in the field. That can be done through robotic training, that maybe it's certification. As many more companies are coming out with robots, it can be done in general labs that they're conducting. You could do things like varus and valgus labs now on knees and have a pathology and deformity to mimic that. And when you're replacing cadavers, they're seeing a cost savings generated around this. On the med ed sales side, there's also a lot of value that's being brought. When you have models that you can show retraction to sales reps who may never see that, right? They're standing in a room, they're trying to provide value to their surgeon, but we have models that they can actually go in and play with and see what it's like to retract every step of the way, a total shoulder or a total hip. And there's a lot of value that also is in that particular space. So I think those are two big components. The third one is with R&D, obviously.
Yeah, got it. That's helpful. I'm interested. The 3D printing of bone makes a lot of sense, and obviously the customization that you talked about. One, I think probably common question you might get, and I'd be curious to hear about, is the feel. Obviously, training in cadavers is partly the bone, but it's often as much or more the soft tissues that surround the bone. So how do you maybe handle that objection or question when you're asked about surgical simulation, that it's not just the bone, it's the soft tissue? So maybe talk a little bit about the feel of this compared to.
Yeah, I'll if you guys can see this, it's a model of our hip, right? So the model of our hip, we're showing the anatomical, you have your glute muscles, you have all the nerves, the muscles, that you would see, the tendons, ligaments as well. And so for us, it is more than just a bony model. It is the soft tissue architecture around the tendons, the ligaments, the muscles that go with these as well. And so from our standpoint, it is to replicate what a surgeon would feel like being in the room with a patient. We know that cadavers don't always do that, both on the deformity as well as the bone quality itself. And so we have the ability to alter our bone. We can take it from a adolescent, hard bone all the way up to osteoporotic bone and arrange that both in the cortical, the cancellous, and the intramedullary canals. So that's pretty powerful in itself. But the soft tissue balancing, when we have surgeons that are retracting and they comment about that tension that they're feeling, and whether they're doing a total hip or total knee, we know that we have this balance. And one last point I would make is that we do more robotic testing. You see what those values are on the screen. So when you have an extension or a flexion gap between 15 to 20 millimeters on a knee, you know that's what they're seeing in the OR.
Very interesting. One final question, really business model centric. You know, you mentioned the customization, the patient matched aspects of your business. You know, there have been implant companies that have gone down that pathway, and while they may be spot on from a market fit perspective, they've traditionally struggled with the business model or profitability around that. So I guess without getting into specifics, at what scale do you think you need to get to on a unit basis to hit that profitability inflection point?
Yeah, I think we'll do that this year. I think that we've seen in the first 2 years is that ramp up period that we put into the business. And then this year, as I mentioned, we're going to potentially triple in volume based off the units, and we'll start to see profitability. And part of that was going into the orthopedic space. When you have applications such as foot and ankle, which is one of the fastest growing in extremities, and you're partnering with companies that, you know, designate what key anatomies are essential for them so that they can replace the cadavers, I think that helps us position a product into the marketplace that is received well, because the companies have input and feedback on what they want to see.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wish you all the best. Exciting stuff.
Thank you, Ben, for your thoughtful questions. And now let's go to Mike Sherman. Mike has 20 years of orthopedic product development and innovation in his background and 120 patents. With all that focus on innovation, talk to us, Mike, about how you might address this area of technology with your question.
Thanks, Tony, and congratulations, John. So unlike Scott and everyone else here, I've actually had the chance to use your SurgiSTUD. John, we did a lab. I just was pulling up the pictures. We did a lab in February in my office with a spine. I'm working with a client who had a sample and he sent it to us. And so, there's a giant continuum of reality between, the naked sawbones that we all used, for many, many years in labs. I mean, just, sometimes we had a foam holder, sometimes we didn't, to a cadaver lab. And there's an enormous opportunity to do something that's cheaper and more convenient than cadavers in an office setting, in an OR setting, anywhere. So I think there's a great need, and I think the model we played with addressed that need pretty nicely. But I guess my question is, how do you select where you want to be in that continuum? Because I've seen efforts, and maybe Scott has too, we kind of alluded to it, that were much more sophisticated in terms of simulating muscles, but the costs are prohibitive. How do you feel about the place you are in this, what I would call continuum of reality or realism?
Yeah, I think the realism, it's what drew me to the company, was that high fidelity and haptic feel. When you get a surgeon that is working with this for the first time, keep in mind that a neurosurgeon is the one who started this platform for us 5 years ago. And in his mind, he wanted to simulate a patient on the table. Specifically, it was a scoliosis patient of a young adolescent, right? And so it didn't match having a cadaver of an 80-year-old and doing instruments 2 weeks prior. And so everything was biomechanically tested, I guess is the point. And that biomechanically tested product was in both the with instruments and instrumentation in the spine world, and that's translated over into the orthopedic space as well. And so there is a continuum, but the reality is we're working with spine and with orthopedic surgeons who practice on bone. And so our focus is to derive products that continually help them have that high haptic feel way that would simulate the OR and a patient on the table.
So are you prioritizing the feel of the bone over the soft tissue? Because the model we had it was urethane foam. I mean, most of the soft tissue we were dealing with was urethane foam, and the pictures in your video look like it's pretty much the same. I mean, maybe it's changed a bit.
Yeah, there's been some, we're always evolving, right? And we're always changing based off of technology. And so from our standpoint, it is the feel of not just the bone, but with the soft tissue architecture as well. When you're doing a total knee, and I'll just share my aha moment, was a surgeon who placed the tibial base plate in and he heard a click, right? And you don't hear that unless you're in surgery. You'd never hear it with cadaver. You wouldn't hear it with the synthetic bone models, but he heard a click, and that was the soft tissue as well as the bone working hand in hand. And that's what we strive for, is to replicate that as much as we can.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he was doing the anterior drawer test on that knee. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. You don't do that on a classic old sawbone. Well, anyway, congratulations. I think this is really interesting and it's filling a great need. Cadaver labs are expensive, they're messy, they're logistically challenging, and being able to ship this around is much more convenient.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Mike, I'll share one more thing. You know, I go back to my 30 years of experience, and when you can take this to a surgeon in a hospital, you're not having to ship expensive instruments from point A to point B. You're not having to wash and then sterilize those at $100 a tray. You're not having to dispose of a cadaver. You know, I go back to, you can revisit this too. 2 or 3 days down the road, if you're in a residency program, you can revisit this model, and you could rebroach, you could re-ream, you could turn it into a revision. So the opportunities to continually utilize the benefit that is just unseen in the market today.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Mike, for your inspiring questions here and thoughts with the direct experience of the SurgiSTUD technology. So in this space, if you think about the direction that innovation is going, it's coming in education. And how would you view the cadaver labs responding to what you're doing?
You know, I think the pandemic has kind of pinned them a little bit into what they can do, not alone what we can do. You know, it wasn't uncommon to hear of labs that were canceled, both at academy meetings or in the field, right? Because they couldn't simply get the specimen. We know in talking to our customers that the cadavers have gone up about 30% over this past 6 months. The shipping costs have doubled or tripled in some particular cases. So it's not so much how they're responding to us, it's more of us being proactive with the end user, which is the medical device companies and the surgeons, to get these into the field with them. So
my first experience with this kind of innovation, you might not believe it, was more than 30 years ago in haptics being developed for surgical training that I was first exposed to. And so I think that this is pretty interesting. But audience, what do you think? Now it's time to ask you what you think. As our audience, is this company a game changer? Will this challenge the standard of physician and employee education? Robin Young, publisher of Orthopedics This Week, will present our poll. Robin, let's hand it off to you.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, artificial cadavers. So let's put up the poll and ask the question. So, and Tony's absolutely right. There is a revolution going on in training. And here, this is one solution. It's an interesting one. So is this a game changer? Could it challenge the standard of care, which to a large extent is cadavers? Is it promising but needs more work? Okay, we've got about 10 more seconds to go. Make sure you get your vote in. And 2 more seconds, and there. Let's see what the results are. Well, over half, 56%, say it could challenge the standard of care, being predominantly cadavers. 19% really interested, think it's a winner, and 25% think it's promising, but needs a bit more work. Well, I think SurgiSTUD has definitely found a niche, and I'm sure a lot of companies will be taking advantage of this after our program tonight. And with that, I wish everyone a very good evening, and thank you all, and we'll see you next month. Thanks.